Gary Neville podcast. I think we don't have to explain ourselves. We're going to concentrate this on one match, the match that we've just watched here, which has finished Manchester United 1. Well, we'll maybe throw that in, because we've had a lot to talk about, you and I, over the past 24 hours or so. We know your allegiances. We know how much you care for Manchester United. What have you made now a first reaction, considered reaction, since the final whistle?
That's the question I'm asking myself, Martin. Am I being considered? You know, the disappointment. I'm fuming, really. But then part of your harps back to performances. You know, I played it in the 5-0 away at Newcastle and the 6-3 at Southampton. I've had games like this myself. We watched Manchester City a few years ago come here with 6-2. So then you think, well, we've been...
But you were winning trophies then.
We're winning trophies, but we've been here before. We've had these days. The last few weeks... It's coronavirus. The club have lost a lot of money, but then every other club seems to be getting their targets. They seem to be strengthening the squad. You try and create a defensive position. You try and always look at sort of what would be the positive parrot on one shoulder and the negative on the other and try and balance it out. And you're trying to get the right position. But it's not right. It isn't right. And I said during commentary, I think the club have grabbed defeat from victory because they were in a good place coming out of coronavirus in the lockdown. They handled it really well with good grace, as you would expect. Marcus Rashford's initiatives really did shine a light on the club nationally in terms of what the club were capable of
and
beyond
a
football.
Good run on the pitch as well.
A good run on the pitch, finishing third in the league. Even the disappointment in the Europa League was with a good performance, I felt. So you say to yourself, well, OK, it was obvious. A centre-back, a centre-forward, a right-winger, a left-back. Not necessarily a central midfield player. I think they could have maybe done with someone in there, but not a priority. But the back four needed strengthening and the forward line needed strengthening to get up to a standard whereby they can compete with City and Liverpool. And maybe even this season with that strengthening they wouldn't have done. And my view on it is quite simple. If you invest now in difficult times, you'll get probably better deals. Maybe not on Sancho, but on other deals. It's been proven. Werner was cheaper. Jota, Thiago, they've been cheaper than the other deals that we've seen historically. And you think, well, if in 18 months Manchester United don't win the league in this next 18 months, and this season I can write it off, they won't, next year's going to be difficult because City and Liverpool will still be strong. It'll cost more in 2 years to do it than it would do today. So why not do it today and think that it'll be certainly cheaper? So to not get your ducks in a row, to not get your signings in, they're really inefficient in the transfer market. And the reason the light shines on Ed Woodward, it doesn't need to shine on Ed Woodward. Ed Woodward has proven himself over a period of 10, 15 years to be a highly competent individual at running this football club from a business perspective. The club's operationally profitable. Its commercial revenues are off the scale. Even the ticket prices have stood still, which maybe doesn't get a lot of publicity, but it have done for a number of years. But why not put in place a football structure, an individual at the club who is the best in the world with sporting expertise to make sure that Manchester United are ahead of the game in signing players, dealing with agents. These are really difficult things to do in all levels. It's not easy to do these things. So I'm not sat here saying it's an easy job he's got.
He's got bosses, the owners of the club, he is responsible to, and the financial situation of the club is dictated by them.
Yeah, and they've invested money. You can't sit here and say that £1 billion that's been spent in the last 9 or 10 years isn't support for the managers who've been here. But it just feels that with Jose, I thought they built half a team and went halfway. With Ole now, I think that the principles of it have been pretty good in this last 18 months of the signings. I'm supportive of Van der Beek and Fernandes and Wan-Bissaka and Maguire, the type of signings they brought in, James, the young players coming through. But it needed... You can't just go halfway. You're competing with Manchester City and Liverpool. And there is an element of, well, shall we be patient? But then it's how long do Manchester United have to wait before they win a title again? It's going to be 8 years. It's going to be 9. It's going to be 10 if we're not careful.
But we're going into the game to the backdrop of that. And get a penalty, Manchester United get a penalty after 30 seconds and score it. And that seemed to be, Tottenham usually lose here. I know they've had a couple of victories of different managers. VF Boas won here, I think Tim Sherwood won here, and of course Pochettino won here a couple of years ago. Everyone will remember that. But really, they're there for the taking. They played 3 games already this week. And suddenly, it's a calamitous collapse on the field from some of the players that you've actually mentioned as being good signings.
Martin, there is no doubt, if you're a Manchester United player wearing that shirt today that's played, you just have to hold your hands up and say that is nowhere near good enough. It's pathetic.
What's the trigger for that, though? I mean, they're 1-0 up, and they're not thinking about who's being signed or anything like that. They're trying to win a game of Premier League football.
I read out that Luke Shaw quote, didn't I, though, about
the need
for players to come into the club. And they're not immune to social media and the news of the last... They've seen every other club strengthen. And they're probably thinking, well, we've got as much out of this squad as we possibly can. I mean, Ollie's never going to break rank. He's never going to go rogue. And to be fair, Luke Shaw's comments, I mentioned them during the game, saying we need players. You know, to me, gives an inkling into... Because he's not... we know Luke Shaw. He's not a rogue player. He's not somebody who does a lot of the media. For him to say that gives you a sense of what the players want. Yeah, I remember Wayne Rooney famously saying, who are you signing to Sir Alex Ferguson? It didn't go down particularly well. I remember Roy Keane after a game in Bayern Munich saying that these players now, if you remember, you know, we need more players because the players that have eased off after the 99. So there have been moments in the history of the club, in the recent history, where the players in the dressing room want the signings as much as the fans, where they demand it because they want better. They want, you know, I'm sure those Liverpool players have grown 10 feet tall since they signed Thiago a couple of weeks ago. I think they think, whoa, we've got Thiago in the dressing room and Jota as well to supplement the front three. So I think they feel better for it. Great players, good teams want challenge. They want better players and get with them.
I get all that, but would you have foreseen a group of Manchester United players falling apart as quickly as they did here?
But they look demoralised, and that where I'm getting to with it is that the minute that they concede a goal, there's been the Harry Maguire incident in Mykonos, there's been the Mason Greenwood incident, and there's been the sort of turmoil around recruitment. I think when they then go 2-1 down, and this negativity that's there, it just explodes in their heads. It just goes off, and where they might be positive for a period, all of a sudden they just capitulate. Their mind capitulates. It's a mental block, and you would have to say that means they're not strong enough to, at this moment in time.
And of course the sending off happened as well.
The sending off as well. So there are other factors, but they were done before the sending off. That 4 or 5, that barrage of chances that Tottenham had, of 4 or 5 chances at 2-1, they could have been out of the game anyway. And Tottenham looked sharp. They looked lively. They responded well. So when you say, at this moment, this group certainly are suffering confidence-wise, mentally. Where does that come from, you ask? Why is the capitulation? I think it comes from potentially the incidents off the pitch with the players. It comes from the darkness of the media reporting that we haven't signed anybody. We've not got a good enough squad. Liverpool have pressed ahead. City have gone and signed Diaz. Chelsea have signed Werner and Havertz and all those, but Thiago. So what the players see this, they're aware of this. And at this moment, they're not strong enough and resilient enough to be able to cope with what comes at them in a game that might not go their way, is my view.
The Bet365 app gives you everything you'll ever need to bet on.
Today have had some bearing on that as well. After all, mixed relationships between some of the players that were playing in red today and the previous manager.
Well, it was a prickly build-up. There's always an element of prickliness with Jose, and there will have been probably in the back of their minds, maybe, shouldn't have been, but maybe there was a little bit of anxiety that we don't want to lose to him. Even from Ollie and the coaching staff, we don't want to get beat by him. We don't want him rubbing it in. We don't want him dancing on our grave after the game. Because Jose is the type of manager that wouldn't shy away from this today. He's too experienced. He's won too much. But for United's coaching staff, some of them are still inexperienced. Kieran McKenna, Michael Carrick, Ollie himself. Obviously, Mike Phelan's been through it all before. But there will be an element of, we don't want to get beat by him today. We don't get done by him.
We haven't heard, we're talking now, we haven't heard what Jose said after the game.
And I know, but there'll be an element of before the game imagining what would happen if Jose won here. Yeah. So, I mean, the players might have been aware of that. So, again, that's a mental thing that you think about, what are the pundits saying? What's the other manager going to do? What happens if this happens? That's when you're asking me why they've capitulated and the body language has gone into what would be at second half, spiritless body language. It's because I think purely these types of thoughts are going through their heads. They shouldn't be, but I would imagine they are. I don't know they are. I don't speak to the players. I don't speak to Ollie about it. I would imagine it just looked to me like there is a deeper feeling in there of negativity than there should be about going 2-1 down and losing a man to a red card.
We must touch on the Manchester City situation because they lost 5-2 at home a week ago, and we saw them playing a very different kind of match, a joyous, romantic match, if you like, at Leeds. But they're a little bit off the pace as well, aren't they?
Well, I think Pep will start to come under pressure. I mean, I think it was after the Leicester game to you that I feel that this will be his biggest challenge in his managerial career. Gone one season now without a title. I mean, he's been exceptional at Manchester City, let's be clear. But the money that's been spent this summer again, you know, there will be pressure if he goes 2 years without a title, if they start getting beat 5-2 and then Leeds look like they're ripping them apart. And the one thing we were speaking about before the game today, and the interesting thing, was that they were going punch for one another. There was about 20 minutes in the second half where we were delirious with the football we were watching. It was just pure entertainment. It was glorious. It was football as it should be in the playground as a kid, where one team attacks, the other attacks, the other attacks, then the other attacks, and who cares about defending? And yet Pep just had to step back. He had to come back and he had to defend. He had to put his gloves up. He brought Ake on to replace Mendy and shore that left-hand side up where Poveda was struggling. Poveda was causing big problems. And then in the middle of the pitch, he put Fernandinho with Rodri to try and stop those counter-attacks. And it actually, to be fair, meant City finished the game stronger. But in the back of Pep's mind, there'll be an element of, I've had to step back in that game. I've had to put my gloves up and defend to get back in the game. It was good management from him. It's the type of thing that when the manager was seen doing his interview now, Jose Mourinho would have done naturally to obviously get to that conclusion of a game. But it was a really brilliant match. It was excellent to watch. But you're right, City are dropping points. And Liverpool look... They look clinical. They look brutal when you watch them. That performance against Arsenal the other night was a class.
We're speaking before they play Aston Villa, so yeah.
Well, look, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen against Villa. To be fair, Martin, if I go home now and see that Villa have beaten Liverpool, then it might just raise my spirits slightly, but we don't anticipate it, do we?
It's early, but it's Merseyside with Everton going well rather than Manchester.
Yeah, and... we know that Liverpool, the red half of Merseyside, were going to do well this season. Everton, I think we all hoped, actually, that the signings that they made, Alan, Rodriguez and Decore, would give them that little bit of belief that they could then go and mount a top four challenge. Because I think there's been an element of Everton in these last few years that we've been watching thinking, why haven't they just been able to step up? But it looks like they may be finally doing it.
I think you need an international break.
Martin, I'm on with you next Sunday, England versus Belgium. I'm like, oh my God. I actually nearly put an advert out at half time if anybody wanted to come and do the co-commentary in the second half, because I'm fully conscious that during the second half, you're trying to get the balance right. You're a Manchester United fan. I'm in despair, part of me, and part of me is angry. Part of me is thinking, well, is it that bad? I'm patient. I grew up for 20-odd years not watching United win the league, so it isn't that bad. But then the other part of it thinks, no, it is bad. We shouldn't drop our standards. We should be demanding that Manchester United are number one. And that's the thought of Manchester United fans' heads is we look a way off, and that's not good enough.
The darkest hour is before the dawn. We'll see what the transfer window brings.